All right, y'all, welcome back to Principles of Accounting 2. We finally made it all the way to week 13, if you could believe that or not. It feels like ever since we started November, it has just been hustling by. It's just the speed always seems like it picks up pace in November. We're already, I don't even know what happened. I mean, it seems like November just blew on by us. It's already the 20th of November. So here we are chilling in week 13, and it's Thursday already. So today we're going to talk about relevant costs for decision making. This is a really fun conversation that we're going to have. I'm going to give you some real life stories, things that have happened to me that help to make this really relatable and entertaining. Um, and that'll be today, and then for Sunday night, we have two action items for you. The first for this week is there's a LinkedIn Learning certificate that's due on Sunday, and it's for leveraging generative AI in finance and accounting. This is a new certificate, new this year for the obvious reason. But I wanted to change things up for this class because I really feel like it's important for you to understand how to use AI in a meaningful way. And so having this certificate is really super, super beneficial for you. Um, because as you know, AI has invaded every aspect of our daily lives, and especially in the workplace. And understanding how AI is currently used in finance and accounting is really going to set you aside from any other candidates that are applying to jobs in these fields. And in a general sense, being able to show an employer that you understand how to use artificial intelligence super, super critical. It's gonna, I see it all the time now on job descriptions as a requirement. So please, you know, in addition to taking this certificate, because it's required for this class, obviously, but I really do want you to put this one on your LinkedIn profile because I'm telling you right now, employers see this, all of a sudden you became a lot more attractive as an employee. So seriously, I want you to look at this one very seriously. Um, it'll certainly help you. So that's for this Sunday night, leveraging generative AI in finance and accounting, LinkedIn Learning Certificate. In addition to that, we also have the Chapter 25 quiz related to our discussion that we're going to have today. So those are your two action items for Sunday night. I just wanted to call your attention to those now instead of later because it's already Thursday, and I want to make sure that you get ahead of the game and don't be stressing yourself out on no Sunday night. So, okay, so those are your two action items for this week. Next week we'll wrap up our lecturing with capital budgeting and investment. That's another fun one, another fun conversation. And then the final week of the course, there's opportunity for us to review for the final exam. We'll do that on December the 4th, and we'll also discuss this last assignment that you have, which is actually a short essay. But I just want to give you an idea of what's ahead. And please start working on this stuff now so that way you don't have to stress yourself out toward the end of the semester. Okay, let's jump into the conversation on relevant costs for decision making. And I want to talk to you about this from the perspective of what has happened in my career as it relates to making some of these decisions. And maybe some of you can relate to this as well. I think that this is a really fun conversation. Some of the stuff that we're going to talk about, uh, there's a really common thing in business. We call it the make or buy decision. Some stuff we can make in-house, we can make it ourselves, or we can buy that same product from somewhere else. Uh, Really great decision. This is something that we go through in business a lot. I'm going to give you some personal perspective on that. We'll also look at the sell or process it further decision. The example I like to use for sell or process it further is oil. So we obviously drill the oil from the ground, we extract it, we put it into drums, and then we make a decision. Do we sell it as it is, just simple crude oil, or do we process it further into the derivatives of oil, which would be like gasoline and kerosene? Um, Very important decision there. Another one is our sales mix, the multiple products that we sell and the constraints that we have to selling them. With that one, I like to talk about Peloton, which is a really interesting company. For those of you who know Peloton, they manufacture and sell gym equipment. Their most popular gym equipment is their stationary bike, but they also have treadmills, ellipticals, and rowing machines that they sell. And the reason why I talk about Peloton a lot is because they're in a lot of trouble right now. So it's they have a couple of decisions that they need to make. I've been doing a little bit of consulting work with them, so I want to talk to you about Peloton. Um, which relates to what Peloton segment elimination decisions. They have to make a decision on whether to keep making that treadmill or not because they're not making a whole lot of money doing it. So segment elimination is a decision they need to make. Keep or replace decision, real popular decision, especially with aging equipment and machinery. Give an example from my hotel life back in the day when I was a financial controller of the second largest hotel in New York State. We had a chiller on the roof that broke, and we had to make a decision whether to repair it and keep it or to replace it. Yep. So I'll tell you about that story. I'll talk to you how we set the sales price for products and also um, special offer decisions. Sometimes you might have a customer that'll say, "Hey, listen, I need you to sell me 1,000 units, but I don't want to pay full retail. I want to pay a discounted rate. We call it a special offer. I'm going to show you what that looks like as well." So these are really, really popular and common decisions that we as managers go through, and so there's a lot of relevance behind it. So as we make decisions, management goes through what we coin as the decision-making process for managers. And there's 5 steps that we go through when we make decisions as managers. The first one is to define the decision that needs to occur. You know, what is it that we're trying to do here? Are we trying to make or buy the product? Are we trying to sell it as it is or process it further? What's the decision that we need to make? So that's step one. The second step is to identify alternative courses of action. For example, if I'm trying to decide between two pieces of machinery or two similar products or two alternative courses, like do I sell it as it is or process it further, I need to figure out what my alternative courses of action are. The third step in the decision-making process is to collect all the information related to the decision. So all of the available cost information, pricing information, uh, the expected useful life information, all of the details related to the decision, gather all that together, which leads me to step 4, which is, really making the decision. We select one of the courses of action. And then step 5 is we go back and we evaluate, did we make the right decision or not? Assess that decision and then make any adjustments if we need to. But that is the 5-step model for managerial decision making. And this isn't just for accounting. We look at this same model for pretty much all decisions that we make in life as managers. And so I find this one to be really, really important. So, once we figure out, hey, do we have to make a decision, identify the alternatives, we of course need to take into consideration the costs and benefits, the cost benefit analysis, if you will. Uh, because as a manager, we have to make sure that we identify any costs associated with the decision and the benefits of making that decision, right? So a couple of components involved here that we consider. The first is what we call incremental revenue. This is the additional revenue that we would generate by selecting a specific uh, course of action over another, right? So if the incremental revenue is an additional dollar or two per unit, then that could be a really attractive decision. So we call it incremental revenue. It's the additional revenue generated uh, by making one decision over another. The next thing we examine is called incremental cost. This is the additional cost that we would incur by making one decision over another. Call it incremental costs. And of course, there's a lot of other costs we're going to talk about here as well. And then, of course, your revenue minus your costs equals your incremental income. So incremental revenue minus incremental cost equals incremental income. This is the additional income that we generate based off of making one decision over the other. Now, the rule of thumb that we apply overall is whichever decision makes us the most income is the one we're going to go with, right? We're in business to make money. We're in business to make profit. So we're going to go with the best decision that helps us to make that profit, to make that money. So these are the relevant costs and benefits. Along the lines of those costs, we need to understand the difference between what is relevant and irrelevant to the decision-making process. You know, when you make a decision, oftentimes you're given too much information that can cloud our judgment, right? It's like, I'll give you an example of this. This example will come up more than once. So back in my hotel days, um, back in New York, I was at the second largest hotel in the state, and huge freaking property, ginormous building, okay, ginormous, huge. We're talking, um, 20 floors of guest rooms. You got 100,000 square feet of banquet space, a couple of restaurants, uh, giant property. Then you got the back of the house, which is also a lot of space involved there. All the supporting areas. You got the front of house, which involves front desk, uh, you know, banquets, uh, your rooms division, which includes housekeeping staff, and then you got your oh, and of course your restaurants, and then you got your back of house, which is all your support, right? You got your sales staff, you got your admin staff, you got your engineering department, which does all the repairs and maintenance, human resources, accounting, all of the back end stuff, right? So think about everything that's involved in a property like that. Huge property. So this one summer, the building started getting awful warm. So I didn't think anything of it 'cause it was a real hot day. And I'm sitting in my office, I'm starting to sweat a little bit. And the chief engineer comes running into my office, like this panicked look on his face. I'm like, what's up, man? He goes, Feel a little warm? I'm like, well, yeah, but it's also 95 degrees out, so yeah, a little warm. He goes, no, no. Does it feel a little bit more warm in the building than it normally does? He says, well, yeah. He goes, like, we have a problem. I said, what's the problem? He goes, you know that big giant box on the roof of the building? I go, yeah. He goes, inside there is what we call a chiller. It cools the entire building down during the summer and heats it during the winter. I go, okay, so what's this chiller thing do? And he explains to me, it's a big fan and there's all these pipes and kind of works like your car does. It pumps when you turn your AC on, it pumps cold air in and it takes the hot air out, right? And when you have heat, pumps the hot air in from the engine. Works the same way, okay? But think of it as this huge industrial machine, like the size of your house is the size of this chiller, okay? Giant, giant piece of machinery on the top of the building. If you go around DC, you'll see chillers on rooftops. If you ever get a chance to get above other roofs, take a look out, and you're going to see these big, giant cooling machines. Those are chillers. A little bit smaller than the one I'm talking about, but you get my point. So anyway, this chiller breaks, right? It's starting to break, and he goes, "Well, we have a problem here. We need to either fix this thing or replace it." And so I'll get to the cost here in a second, but as you can imagine, it's very expensive to fix a machine that size. So it involved a couple of relevant and irrelevant costs. Now, we made the decision to purchase that chiller about 20 years ago. So we call that a sunk cost. It's a cost that came from a past decision. I cannot change the past. It's something that we've already done in the past. So it's irrelevant to my decision making process about repairing or replacing it. So we call it a sunk cost. Cost happened in the past, can't change it, and it's irrelevant to the future decision making process. Sunk cost. Now, that in turn tells us about these other costs associated with this situation that I was in. One of them is the out of pocket costs. These are the costs that require a future outlay of cash and are relevant to the decision making process. If we decide to repair the chiller, the out of pocket cost is repairs and maintenance. Okay. Put a big band aid on it and hopefully it'll last another couple of years. That's the repair part of the decision. The replace part of the decision is obviously a much larger out of pocket cost that I would have to come up with. So we call those out of pocket costs. Now, here's the thing there's also this thing called an opportunity cost. This is the cost that we have foregone by making an alternative decision. So, if I decide to make the repair on the chiller, the opportunity cost is the cost of replacing the chiller. Okay, it's whatever we have foregone. We call that an opportunity cost. So if I repair the chiller, that's my cost. The opportunity cost is what I gave up or foregone. In this case, replacing the chiller. Caleb.
Oh, I was just gonna say, so either decision you make is gonna be an opportunity cost.
That's right. So if we're faced with two alternatives,
Right.
whatever the decision that we make, the other cost is called the opportunity cost.
All right.
So it's whatever
Gotcha.
we gave up or
Okay.
did not go with. Great
Yeah.
question. So those are opportunity costs. Then we have what we call avoidable costs. These are costs that can be eliminated by choosing one alternative over the other. If I repair the chiller, The avoidable cost is replacing the chiller. Okay. I can avoid replacing it if I just repair it. So those are the types of costs that we need to consider in our decision-making process. We ignore sunk costs because those are costs in the past. I don't even consider that in my decision-making process. What I do consider are the related costs, the relevant costs to making the decision. So I'll bring up the chiller part again when we get to the repair or replace conversation. But I just wanted to give you that as an example early on because it helps you to understand the cost that I had to think about in my decision making process. So let's first talk about the make or buy decision. I can either make a product in house or I can outsource it. If I make it in house, sometimes it costs less, sometimes it costs more than if I were to purchase it off the shelf or outsource it. Okay, so here we have an example. This company, they make starters for vehicles. Okay, the company's name is Fast Track. They make parts. Okay, they make automotive parts. Particularly, we're looking at a starter for a particular part, which is the relay on an alarm system that goes in a vehicle. Okay, so the company is currently purchases this part, this relay, for $1.20 per unit. If they were to make it in-house, it would cost them $1.05, which includes direct materials cost, which is the wiring and the electronic components, the direct labor cost, the cost of the employees putting these parts together, and the factory overhead, the variable factory overhead component. So we have to make a decision. Do we make, this company has to make a decision. Do they make the relay for this, uh, do they make the relay for this um, alarm system that goes in the vehicle on their own? Do they do it in-house or do they purchase it from on the open market or from a distributor, outsourcing? So the decision is make or buy. Now, in this case, it makes sense for us to make it for the company to make it in-house because it only costs $1.05 versus buying it for $1.20. So in this case, it would make sense for them to make it in-house. The next type of decision we go through as managers is to sell it as it is or process it further. Now, the example I gave earlier was oil. An oil company might decide to sell the crude oil as it is in the barrel, or they can process it further into derivatives, which would be fuel for vehicles or kerosene for heat. Uh, Now the company needs to decide this. What do we sell it as it is, or do we process it further? And the decision depends on a couple of additional costs, what we call incremental costs, and the potential incremental revenue that will be generated by processing it further. So definitely need to consider those. Uh, and we'll select whichever one obviously is going to derive a higher revenue for us. So whichever yields additional income is what I'm going to go with. The higher the income, the better. Uh, so here we have an example of a company that is in the oil business, and they can sell the barrel of oil as it is for $50,000, or they can process it further into a derivative like fuel. Okay. If the company processes the oil further into a derivative like fuel, they can earn a revenue of $150,000 per barrel, but they will also incur an additional cost of 80,000 that stems from the refining process. So that means that uh, the additional or the incremental income in this case, if we process the oil into fuel, the incremental income would be 20,000 because I could yield an income of 70. So it's the revenue minus the cost equals the income. So in this case, the revenue of 150 minus the additional cost of 80 gives me income of 70. So the incremental income in this case is 20. Um, so yeah, I'm going to process the oil further for sure, and sell that as fuel because I'm going to yield 20,000 additional. We do not consider the original cost to sell it as it is, which would be the cost of extracting it from the ground, because we were going to do that anyway. It's a sunk cost. I was going to do it anyway, so I don't even consider it. That in the decision-making process, we call it a sunk cost. So as we can see with this decision, yeah, it would make sense for us to process it further. Remember, whichever one yields us the higher income is what we're going to do. Here's another decision that oftentimes that we face, and not just in manufacturing sometimes, but also, in other instances. But here we have one for manufacturing, which is, do we scrap the production or do we try to rework it to fix it? Sometimes in manufacturing we make mistakes. Yeah, it's like, oh, I'll give you a really good example. Man, this one irritated the hell out of me. But I did some consulting work with this company. What they did is they were doing some finishing on furniture. Okay. And so they were producing basically a stain that would go on furniture. Seems like a simple process, one would think, right? So I go to this factory and they're developing this stain that goes on furniture. And I observed their process. So one time the company calls me up and they go, "Hey, we got a situation. We don't know whether to scrap these millions of gallons that we made or try to rework it." I'm like, "What happened?" They said, "Well, a speck of dust got into the factory area where these varnishes or stains were being created, and it basically ruined millions of gallons of this stain." So I was like, "Well, can you salvage any of it? If you process it again, any chance of you being able to get this defect out?" Like, well, yeah, we probably could, but it'll cost us. There'll be an incremental cost to doing that. So I'm like, okay, well, let's run out the numbers and find out. So that was an example I have of scrap or rework. So scrapping simply means that we can sell it as it is for scrap value. right? So here we have an example of a company, that fast track company that made the relays. They screwed up a bunch of relays. They figured we can scrap the metal for $4,000, which will just give us 4,000 in income if we sell it for the scrap metal. Okay, cool. Or they can rework the relays, fix them up to get them to operate properly. So if they do that, they'll be able to get the original planned revenue of 15,000, but it's going to cost them incremental cost of $8,000 to rework those units. So what do you do? You know, so we run out the math. Your revenue minus your incremental cost. In this case, it would make sense for them to rework it because the incremental income would be $3,000 if they decide to rework it. So yeah, the company should rework it in this case. And that was a similar case to the stain company that I was talking about earlier. Uh oh man, the sales mix. This one's good. Um, let's talk about Peloton. When it comes to the sales mix with constrained resources. For those of you who know Peloton, and I'm sure you've probably seen advertisements for their products, and maybe you've seen their products in certain gyms and stuff. But they're really well known for their stationary bikes, but they also make treadmills, elliptical machines, and rowing machines. And they sell these products to gyms and also to individuals. And the price is really stupid high, very, very expensive stuff. So their product mix are the different units that the different types of products that they sell. So that's their product mix or sales mix. So their sales mix is the stationary bike, elliptical, rowing machine, and treadmill. And so their warehouses are relatively small, so they don't have a whole lot of room to make all these different products at once. So oftentimes they have to shift their sales mix around, make more of certain products over another because they're limited in space and they're also limited in time, right? So can only allocate so many machine hours, they only allocate so many labor hours, they can only allocate so much space and time. So they have to work within these scarce resources to be able to produce the various amounts of machines that they sell. So that's an example of Peloton. I'll give you an example of a company that produces two models of scooters that they sell. Just keep things simple. So here they have a pro version and a max version of this scooter that they sell, and they got to figure out, how much of each unit should I be making? And one of the best ways to do that is to compute what we call the contribution margin per machine hour. And the way that we do that is we take the sales price minus the variable cost per unit to get the contribution margin per unit. You remember that from probably a few weeks ago. And then we calculate the contribution margin per machine hour. The way we do that is we take the contribution margin per unit and we divide by the number of machine hours per unit. Now, as you can see here, in this example, the Pro version of this scooter has a higher contribution per machine hour than the Max version of this scooter. So in this case, the company should decide to manufacture more Pro units than they should Max units in order to generate higher revenue or higher net income uh, by producing more pro units than max units. So based off of that sales mix between the pro and the max, uh, they can determine their demand schedule. So here we have an example where there's unlimited demand. If it was unlimited, obviously I would produce all max and no, I'm sorry, all pro units and no max because of that higher contribution per machine hour. So the company can only produce 2,000 units total. That's the limitation. So if we only produce the pro model of the scooter, I could do 2,000 units times $150 per machine hour contribution, giving me $3,000 of contribution margin at 2,000 hours. That's great and all, but we know that with respect to customer demand, they're not just going to want the pro, they're going to want some of this max stuff. So I need to adjust my sales mix here. And so what the company should do in this case is produce mostly pro units and some max units. So knowing that the company has a limitation of 2,000 units per year, we can allocate the amount of machine hours to each, right? Um, and so the way we would do this is we could uh, say let's do 1,200 units for the pro model, and the remainder 800 units for the max, 800 hours for the max. And so based off of that, we take the number of machine hours, multiply that by uh, the num by the unit contribution margin or machine hours per unit to get contribution margin. And then for both, we add them up and we get a total of 260,000. So the decision comes down to allocating our scarce resources appropriately, and we want to allocate based off of the highest margin per unit. Whichever gives me the highest contribution margin per unit, I'm going to allocate as much resources to that as possible over the ones that are a little bit less with scarce resources. And that's what this example shows us. Now, coming back to Peloton, they make those products, the bicycle, the elliptical, the rowing machine, and the treadmill. And some of those products, they are not profitable at all. In fact, it's the company keeps producing negative net income or net loss. And that's because their manufacturing costs are very, very high, and they can't sell it too much higher than their manufacturing cost to make it. So their margins are razor thin on all the products that they sell. So right now, they're being faced with a decision of which of those products to eliminate. Okay, it's a very serious situation that they're in. So, I in business, I'm all for eliminating loss whenever possible. That's the whole idea. But the thing is, if I stop making one of these products, I still have my fixed cost to contend with. I still have to pay the rent, still have to pay the depreciation expense on the equipment, still have to pay, certain things like rent, for example, to keep the place going, to produce the other stuff that I make. So we have avoidable costs and unavoidable costs in this situation. Avoidable costs are costs that I can eliminate if I stop making a certain product, like the treadmill. Unavoidable costs are costs I cannot eliminate even if I decide to eliminate the product. These are typically your fixed costs. So let's take a look at Peloton's situation here. We're saying it's Peloton. It's some other company data, but this is basically Peloton's problem. So take a look at what's going on here with Peloton. So sales have been on the decline for a couple of years now. The way that they make their real income is actually based off of their subscription service, but that's a discussion for another day. Uh, they have the three categories that you can see here, and anytime that one of the products goes into the negative, starts generating a loss, it's a prime candidate to be eliminated. And so I love to eliminate this treadmill. But here's the thing. Um, if I stop making the treadmill, I still have my fixed cost to pay, or at least a portion of those fixed costs, right? So I'm currently losing $10,000 on this treadmill. If I stop making the damn thing, I might either still lose the 15,000, which is my fixed cost, or some factor thereof, because I still have to pay that fixed cost, right? So let's take a look at the decision. If I keep making the treadmill, I'm going to keep losing 10 grand a year. If I stop making the treadmill, I can avoid the sales, avoid the variable costs, avoid the contribution margin. But here's the thing. I can eliminate some fixed costs, like fire the manager because, no product to make, sorry. Um, but I still have to pay the rent, still have to pay the utilities, still have to pay the depreciation expense on the machinery. So I stopped making the treadmill. Now my fixed costs are down to 11,000, but I still have to pay that with no income coming in from that product line. So in this case, I'd lose $11,000 instead of losing 10. So in this case, it would be wise for the company to keep making the treadmill even though they're still losing on it, because technically they're losing less than they would if they had stopped making it altogether. So this is a real decision that Peloton is being faced with right now, and it'll be interesting to see what they decide. But obviously, whatever we decide to lose less of is what we'll do, right? Because the ultimate goal here is to make as much as possible. Now for the keep or replace decision. I told you I'd come back to my chiller situation from the hotel. So here's the deal. The chiller. Man, when that chief engineer come running to my office, he brought some information with him. He said, "Listen, we can keep this thing and fix it, and it'll last another couple of years." So I was like, "Okay, well, how much is that going to cost us?" He goes, "Oh, it should run us probably about maybe $24 million." to fix it, but it'll last us another couple of years. It'll extend its useful life by about 5 years. Right? I'm all thinking to myself, I'm like, you want 20 million bucks for 5 years to just keep this chiller running? I said, I know we need it, but I said, okay, well, how much is it going to cost us if we replace the chiller? Buy a new one. He goes, well, probably somewhere in the ballpark of 120 million. I was like, wow, that's a lot of money. I says, well, I don't think we have $120 million sitting in our capital expenditure budget. So there's no way we're going to be able to afford to do that right now. So I guess we're going to have to keep this thing and limp it along. So we had to make that decision. That was the decision that we made in real life. So just want to give you that example because as managers, sometimes you might be faced with these types of crazy types of decisions that you never would have thought of. So we make the decision. Do we keep it or replace it? Um, Here we have some information from our relay manufacturing company that they had some equipment that they needed to either fix or replace. So they run through the information that they have available. So the existing machine currently worth has a book value of 20,000. The cost to run it every year is 50,000. If we sell that piece of machinery right now, we could sell it for 25,000. So 5,000 above book value. Not bad. It has a remaining useful life of 5 years. So, okay, great. So we're looking at 5 years operating cost of 50,000 per year. Gives me $250,000 operating cost total for the 5 years. That's how much money I would just simply spend on keeping this piece of machinery. Uh, if I sell it, I can earn 25,000 in other income, right? Proceeds from the sale of equipment, 25,000. And if I decide to purchase a new piece of machinery, it'll cost me $100,000 up front. So out of pocket, 100,000, and then per year operating expense of 36,000, which means that for that first year, I'd have an operating loss of 255,000, which is higher than it would be if I just keep operating the machine for the rest of its useful life. So, so in this case, it makes sense for us to keep the existing machine and just run that for the next 5 years. Then later on, we can decide to make a decision to buy. You'll notice that in this decision, we did not include revenue from the operation of the business. Reason being is because that's really a sunk cost because we're going to have a machine anyway. So it doesn't make sense to include the revenue in that decision. That's why you don't see operating revenue here. But in this decision, we decided to keep the machinery. Now, with my chiller situation, we decided to keep that chiller for another couple of years, and then we replaced it. It was just more cost effective for us at that time. So, uh, it, it, do y'all know what blockchain is? Have you at least heard of what blockchain is before today? Not really.
Yeah, blockchain. Yeah,
Caleb, you have?
yeah, yeah.
Okay,
I heard of it
awesome.
before. Yeah.
What have you heard about it?
Ain't that what they be trading at on the blockchain? That's is that like an app or something?
No,
Um,
it's a form of technology.
hmm.
So what it does is it holds a digital record of transactions, and these transactions are coded.
Anonymous, right?
Yeah, kind of anonymous. Yeah, exactly. And they're a part of a string of transactions. That's why we call it a blockchain. It gets chained to other transactions that have occurred. It's a form of a digital ledger, basically, of all the transactions that have occurred. And it provides a lot of transparency. It's also makes it very difficult for somebody to hack into. And managers use blockchain technology to look at their costs in their supply chain and to look at their manufacturing costs, all of the transactions related to it, and it creates basically a digital ledger. Uh, so that's what I wanted to tell you about blockchain. That's why I just bring it up here because it's really um, growing in popularity uh, in 2025, 2026. And I think that a lot of companies will be utilizing blockchain as a form of recording their transactions to a ledger digitally that is more reliable and also improves transparency, and it's very difficult to hack into. So, blockchain is also part of the managerial decision making process to that regard. Uh, Next, I'd like to talk about sales prices. Now, have you ever wondered, hey, how do they come up with this price? I'm just kind of curious as to the sale price, how you came up with this price. There's a couple of ways that companies set prices. I oftentimes think about sales price. When I'm walking through a store, hey, how the heck did they come up with this price? Um, and depending on the type of business you're in, we look at setting our sales price depending on the industry, depending on the type of customers, depending on competition, depending on the brand. And so we formulate what we call a regular price. It's based off of the company's riskiness, what they're willing to do. Uh, the company can either be identified as a price setter or price taker. Price setter is typically when there's a situation where there's very little competition, product's relatively unique, the product has a well-known brand, and there's high barriers to entry. An example of a price setter in my mind is Apple and Samsung. Both of those companies are price setters. Uh, Other companies would be considered what we call price takers. Price takers have a little bit less control over the sales price. Uh, they have more targeted method of pricing. Um, and so they typically have a lot more competition. Product's not as unique. The brand is not as well known. And there's low barriers to entry. I think about televisions in this space. There's a lot of different television manufacturers, very similar product. It's not very unique, and there's a lot of competition. You look at television, you got Vizio, you got Sono, you got Amazon, you got the other larger players like Sony, Samsung, um, you name it. There's a bunch of different manufacturers out there. So the price takers, I think of the television industry from that perspective. So typically prices for goods and services are set somewhere in between a price setter and price taker level. Um, and really depends in the industry and the competitors that you have around you. One method for setting prices that is pretty well known is called the cost plus method. And in automotive repair, so an auto shop, very common that they use what we call a price cost plus method. This is where they add markup to the sale price. So they take the cost of the unit and they add in markup on a per unit basis. In automotive, they add markup to both the service hours and also to the materials, to the parts. Okay. So let's say you bring your vehicle in for service. They'll say, oh, the labor cost is $200 an hour, which is clearly heavily marked up because those techs are only making like maybe 40, $50 an hour. But it's $200 an hour is what they'll charge you, hourly rate, plus the cost of the parts. Now the part, let's say it's a brake pad. Brake pad only costs $20. They're going to charge you probably $100. Okay. Or my favorite one, an air filter. Air filter about $10. They're going to charge you $50, okay, to replace the air filter. That's how they set their prices. It's cost plus. So they set this in really three steps. First step is we determine the total cost per unit. We take the product cost plus selling general administrative expenses. Once we find our total cost, we can then find the total cost per unit. So we take the total cost divided by number of units we expect to sell. Then the second step is we add in our markup. We do that by taking the total cost per unit times markup percentage, 150, 200%. Yep. Then once we have our markup per unit, the third step is determine the sale price. So we take the total cost per unit plus the markup per unit. That gives us our sale price. And that's how the automotive industry sets their sale prices in terms of repair. Now, I can tell you that for furniture sales, furniture and clothing have the two highest markups in the world. Okay. To give you an example, the average markup percentage for furniture is about 800% of the cost. Okay, that's furniture. Yeah, that's why you go to a furniture store, you're like, oh, this sofa cost $1,000. How do they come up with that sale price? It's 800% markup of what it actually costs to make it. Okay. Uh, Clothing, 1,000% markup on average. Okay. Give you an example. Red shirt at Macy's. It costs maybe $1 to make it. Macy's sells it for $50. Okay. Those are real numbers here. This is not made up. So they use cost plus method. Another method to creating sales price, is called the total cost method. This is a pretty straightforward process here. Total cost method, we do this in three steps. The first step is figuring out the total cost per unit. We add the product costs of direct materials, direct labor, factory, variable factory overhead, and fixed factory overhead together. We add in selling general administrative expenses to get the total cost, and then we divide that to get by the number of units we expect to sell to get total cost per unit. This example, $70 per unit. The second step is we add in our markup. So we take the $70 per unit times the percent markup, in this example, 20%, gives us a markup per unit of $14. The third step, we add in that $14 to the $70 per unit it costs to make, giving us a sale price of $84 per unit. So that's total cost method. The next method is called the target costing method. This is where we add in our desired profit. We call this target cost. We take our expected sales price minus our expected profit per unit. That gives me my target cost. We expect to sell each unit at $8 per unit. We want to generate $14 profit per unit. So our target cost is $66. Expected sale price minus target profit per unit. The next method of pricing is called variable cost method. Variable cost method determines the sale price by adding the markup to the variable cost. Pretty straightforward, pretty easy to do. It's 3 steps. First step, we determine the markup percentage. To do that, we take the target profit plus the total fixed costs. We do that first, and then we divide by the total variable cost. The second step is to determine the dollar markup per unit. In that, we take the variable cost per unit times the markup percentage that we got from step 1. The third step is to determine the sale price. To do that, we take the variable cost per unit plus the markup per unit that we got from step 2. And that's the process. We can see that applied to our earlier example. Step 1, we had got a markup percentage of 68%. We got that by taking target profit plus total fixed cost divided by total variable cost. Got us markup percentage. We take that 68% times the variable cost per unit of $50, gives me markup per unit of $34. I add that $34, third step, to my variable cost per unit of $50, give me a sale price of $84. Nice and easy. So that's the variable cost method. So those are all the sale price methods. The next thing I'd like to talk to you about is the special offers. Now, sometimes you might have a customer that comes to you and says, "Hey, listen, I like your product. I'd like to buy your product in bulk." When a customer goes to buy in bulk, we typically offer them a special price. We call this a special offer. Okay. So sometimes we'll sell it below its normal sale price because they're buying in bulk. Call it a special offer. The way we decide to do this is as long as we have a higher income, we will do the deal. If we have a lower income, we will not do the deal or do the offer. So here we have an example. Customer comes in, says, "Hey, listen, we'll buy in bulk if you sell it below your normal sale price." Okay. We normally sell it at $12 per unit. Or I'm sorry, we uh, we normally sell it at $10 per unit. We'll give you $8.50 a unit. Okay, that's the offer. So first we figure out what is it would it be normally if we said that this is what we normally sell for. So $10 per unit, I can make $1 million on average if I sell 100,000 units. My variable cost is $3.40. Uh, I'm sorry. My variable cost is direct materials, direct labor plus factory overhead. Sales minus variable cost equals contribution margin per unit, $3.40. That's 340,000 minus our fixed costs gets me potential income of $2 per unit for a total of 200,000. The customer comes along and says, "Hey, listen, I'll offer you $8.50 a unit, which is below your normal price of $10 per unit, but I want to buy in bulk, so I'll buy 10,000 units." Okay. So, in this case, we extrapolate it out as if we were going to sell 100,000 units. So $8.50 times 100,000 units, 85,000. Variable costs, all that jazz, contribution margin, $1.90 gives me 19,000. This is above what we would normally get here. So if I were to do this, I'd have an income of $1.80 a unit and $18,000 of incremental income. Now, I would say that I would probably do this deal because it gives me that additional income of 18,000 that I would have otherwise had if I had only sold the 100,000 units. So having this additional order, sure, it may seem like we're going to yield a little bit less, but remember that there's some sunk costs in here that we would have incurred anyway, which is your fixed overhead. So without that consideration, we actually have a decent income on a per unit basis, $1.80. So yeah, this is a good deal. I would do this. I would accept any customer's offer as long as it yields the incremental income. Another pricing method I wanted to briefly talk about is time and materials. This is also uh, used in the automotive industry, but it's also used in the home building industry, any type of general contracting. They typically use what we call time and materials pricing. And in this, they charge you direct materials, direct labor, factory overhead, and they'll add they'll add in based off of the time and materials, and they'll mark up both of those. Super common in automotive, mechanics, construction companies, electricians, accounting firms, lawyers, doctors. They all typically use time and materials pricing to price out their services. Very, very common. So we do this in three steps. First is we compute the time charge in terms of dollars per hour. This is based off of direct labor. It includes the non-materials related overhead cost plus the target profit. The second step is we compute the materials markup percentage. This includes the cost of buying the materials, storing them, handling them, plus the target profit on materials. The third step is we estimate direct labor hours and costs to each job. Direct materials cost in order to get the markup per price. So here we have an example of this. This is a builder. Let's say they build homes or whatever. They have a direct labor rate of $40 per hour. They have non-materials overhead rate of $10 per hour. They apply a 3% margin to direct materials cost, and they have a target profit of 22% on every job that they perform. So in that first step, we got a direct rate per hour, $40, plus non-materials rate 10, give me hourly rate of 50, times the 22%, target profit $11, telling me I should charge per hour $61. Second step, materials markup, 3% to the overhead, 22% to the target profit, give me 25% materials markup that I apply to all materials purchased or all materials used on the job. Then the third step is to price the job. Job's going to take 300 hours. That's at $61 per hour. Materials going to cost me 14,000 times 25% markup, giving me a total time and materials markup price for the job 35,800. So very, very common practice for pricing out time and labor. And then, my friends, it brings us to our end of our discussion today for relevant costs for decision makers. So now you know how to price your products and services appropriately. You know how to look at all the costs related to making decisions. So now you can go forth and run your businesses efficiently as managers. Are there any comments, questions, concerns that you have for me tonight?
This chapter was really helpful for me to have a reference to price my stuff on Etsy, if that helps
Nice.
any.
That's great. I'm so happy to hear that. Yes. You're absolutely right. This is a great opportunity for you, especially to be able to figure out the most appropriate ways to price your stuff, because you got to factor in your time, the cost of storing the items, all of those things, and then figure out, what's the appropriate markup. So I'm great. I'm glad that this helped you. Excellent. Um, just to kind of remind you all of what you have to do for Sunday night, 2 action items. One is the generative AI in finance and accounting LinkedIn Learning Certificate. Again, I think that this one's beneficial for you to have on your LinkedIn profile. It's going to set you aside from other people that might be applying to the same jobs, because employers love seeing that you know how to use AI. Okay. So, LinkedIn Learning Certificate due Sunday night, and also the quiz related to this chapter. So, those are your 2 action items for Sunday. Any comments, questions, concerns? Awesome. Well, again, thank you all so very much for your time today. I sincerely appreciate all of you. Let's keep up the positive momentum and finish strong. If you need anything, you know how to reach out to me. You can email me, call me, set up office hours, whatever. Thank you all so much for your time. Appreciate all of you. Have a wonderful night and a great weekend ahead.
Thank
And
you.
I'll
Bye.
see you
Thank
all
you.
on Tuesday.
Good night.
Good night. Good night. Ciao, ciao. Good night. Good night.